The first edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now. This is Carolina basketball.
Black holding high, goes to Daugherty. Daugherty in the double team, gives it back to Black with 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan, jumper from out on the left, good! Michigan out of timeout. And Weber, front court, Carolina thought he'd travel with it. Weber, front court, Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout, they're out of timeout. Technical foul on Michigan.
Now gets it away to Donald Williams. Down the side to Stackhouse. Stackhouse streaking in on Park. Reverse dunk is good, and he gets fouled by Park. Oh, my goodness, what a dunk.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out to Head. Long outside shot. Short rebounded. May! It's over! Carolina has won the national championship. Belton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. 89-72. And how about them Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time.
From HeelToughBlog.com, this is the Four Corners podcast, featuring your host, Josh Marlowe. Hello and welcome to the first edition of the Four Corners podcast. I am your host, Josh Marlowe. Joining me is my co-host, Anthony Pagnotta. I know when I last talked to you, we were on the Roy's Boys podcast, and I told you that we were going to become the Hubert Hoopers podcast, but after long discussions, long thought, and a trouble with the voiceover, I decided to go with a little bit more simpler podcast that still ties in Carolina basketball into the name, and therefore I settled on the Four Corners podcast. Of course, everyone knows the Four Corners offense was designed and made famous by Dean Smith, ran to perfection by Phil Ford in the mid-'70s, and is a part of Carolina basketball's lineage. And today we get to talk about the next era of Carolina basketball, as Carolina made official the hire of Hubert Davis, announcing him as the 19th head coach on Tuesday afternoon inside the Smith Center. Former head coach and Hall of Famer Roy Williams was in attendance for that. So in a little bit we will touch on that press conference. We got some audio we pulled that we will play, so you can hear from the head coach of the Tar Heels as well. Let's touch on the hire, though, kind of what it meant, the statistics behind Hubert Davis being the head coach. He does stay within the Carolina family, as, of course, he was a four-year player, playing from 1988 through 92, was a member of the 1989 and 91 teams that won the ACC, was a member of the 91 team that reached the Final Four, that ultimately lost to Roy Williams and Kansas that season. I believe that was in Indianapolis, where Carolina lost, where Duke would go on to win actually their first national championship under Coach K. Davis had a 12-year career in the NBA. Following his lengthy time in the association, we grew up knowing Hubert Davis as the analyst, spent 7 years at ESPN, was a main part of their coverage on College Game Day. Following that, he became the assistant head coach at Carolina in 2012, joining Roy Williams' staff with no prior coaching experience, was a lead recruiter under Roy Williams, and coached the JV team for 7 seasons. As I mentioned, he does become the 19th head coach in program history. He is the first African-American head coach in the history of Carolina basketball, and the third full-time African-American head coach in UNC athletics. Everett Withers, who was an interim football coach before the hire of Larry Fedora, is the fourth. And before we touch on the press conference, and before I really talk about the discussion of Hubert Davis being named the head coach, we talked on Monday when the announcement happened, and then we haven't talked really since his presser on Tuesday, but it appears as if Carolina has found the next guy to lead this program for the next 10 to 15 years or so.
Well, that's what they're hoping for sure. That was why the move was made. This is a long-term move. And, I think that's about right. I mean, he is 50 years old, so I think that the general thinking is that you would expect he's probably going to be able to give you about 15 to 20 years if he is the guy that you end up thinking he can be, which I definitely think there's a chance. It is hard to imagine that he has already been there 9 years under Roy Williams and led the JV team for 7 seasons. I definitely think that that's what they were hoping for with the hire, going within the family, but hoping to find a guy that's going to be there for a while because, as we did touch on, and I think one of the things that was really interesting was when you talked about going outside of the Carolina family, there were some really good options. Guys like Mark Few that a lot of people brought up. For some people, they thought that for some reason Jay Wright was a great option. I didn't think he was a great option for this program, but that's something that we can look back on for years to come and keep debating whether or not I'm an idiot. But with both of those guys in particular, Mark Few, blew me away. He's 58 years old. Mark Few does not look 58 years old. Jay Wright, 59. So some of these guys, a lot of the guys outside of the family are older guys. So, with Hubert Davis, you're getting a guy that you would imagine. First of all, like we've seen before, unless things get really bad, they're going to give you some time to get yourself the type of guys that you want, get your system in place. Which, again, there's not going to be many, this isn't installing a whole new system. This isn't a complete rebuild. This is a team that's still going to have a lot of talent on it. It appears, one of the things that we were talking about after the hire was, does this change any of the decisions from the guys that have already said they were coming back? Because as far as we knew, just from looking at the timeline and what had been told to us, guys like Caleb Love, this wasn't a part of their decision. They were not told ahead of time that Roy Williams was thinking about retiring. When he agreed to come back, it was to play under Roy Williams. But it does not seem like that has changed anything for him. It doesn't seem like it's changed anything for any of the other guys. Everybody's just kind of gone ahead with their decision. So I still think that he is going to have a lot of guys coming back. He's not implementing a new system. He'll probably have some tweaks to it, but it's not a completely new system. So I don't think he's going to need that much time to do that, but they are going to allow you some time to sort of get, learn trial by fire, because that's what it's going to be for Hubert. This will be the first time that he will be a head coach, so there are going to be some ups and downs. But I think that Bubba Cunningham, Kevin Gustowitz, they are going to let him work through that a little bit, especially if they feel confident in the staff that is around him. They're going to let him do what he needs to do, and it'll run its course for a couple of years. I don't think that they're really going to have to worry. I know there's a lot of people that are concerned that this is another Matt Doherty-style hire. I don't think that this is what that is. I do think that this is going to be successful. I think the biggest thing is, how successful can it be?
Yeah, and we'll touch on that in a little bit, and we'll touch about the style of play, because I do think we are in for an adjustment period for the way we're accustomed to seeing the Tar Heels play basketball. I do think it'll be different under Hubert Davis, but we'll touch on a couple things also before we get to the press conference and some of that audio we got pulled. The Matt Doherty thing, the biggest difference between this situation and when Matt Doherty got hired is Hubert Davis was the first choice. He was the leading candidate to get the job. He had the utmost support of Roy Williams. That was who Roy Williams advocated to take over for him. When Matt Doherty got the job, he was the last resort option within the Carolina family. He wasn't Dean Smith's first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice. He was last resort to keep the job within the family. He never took over with the utmost support of the people and the people that are involved in making these decisions. Not even Dick Bedore supported him 100%. That's why after 3 years, and granted, you lost 36 games in 2 years, but after 3 years, he got canned because it was easy for them to move on from him because they didn't want him to have the job as it is. This isn't the case. The outpouring support for Hubert Davis from the Carolina family has been it's been astounding, from players that he never played with to the current players now. That's why you're not seeing, outside of, we know we've lost Garrison Brooks since he named the head coach, but that decision was kind of already predetermined before the retirement. But guys like Caleb Love and R.J. Davis and all those guys, other guys that we were worried about could leave after he announced head coach. That's not happening. They all love Hubert Davis, and they're all excited to play underneath him. A fun fact for you guys, and then for you, Carolina has 3 living coaches that have coached the program. I've met 2 of them. You got to meet Matt Doherty when we talked with him 2 summers ago on the Roy's Boys edition of the podcast. I actually met Hubert Davis and have a picture with him that I'm trying to get my mom to track down. Back in 2013, we went to Chapel Hill. I have a lot of family that lives in the Triangle area. We were actually going up for a birthday party, but we made a pit stop in Chapel Hill the day of the Duke game on senior night, the only time we lost on senior night under Roy Williams, at the Carolina Basketball Museum. I got to meet him, got a picture with him. I'm trying to track that picture down, but that's now we got to track down Roy Williams. So I have the 3 for 3 with living.
We do have to do that.
Living Carolina basketball coaches that I have gotten the pleasure to meet. And so that's cool and all. And
shameless plug, by the way.
Yeah, I just had to get that in there. Let's move on to the press conference, because we knew going in that he's not going to have any problem winning media sessions and winning the media over. You spent 7 years at ESPN. You're pretty good at that. We've seen the effect that Mac Brown's had on the football side of things, how it's been a positive thing for the program. It's helped recruiting in so many ways. Carolina doesn't need ESPN to help its recruiting, but it doesn't hurt having a guy that's been in the media to help you as we're going through a new era. And you saw Reese Davis, Jay Billis, Fonzo Ellis, even Seth Greenberg with positive things to say about Hubert Davis taking over as the next head coach of Carolina basketball. But as emotional as Roy Williams' retirement was, his introductory press conference was just as emotional. He opened up with saying that he's an emotional guy and he wears his emotions on his sleeve. And I think that's something that as we're adjusting to this new era, we won't have to get adjusted to seeing emotion, because for 18 years we saw Roy Williams show emotion in press conferences, whether it was in a good manner or in a bad manner. I think we'll have the same thing under Hubert Davis. He touched on a lot of different things in terms of how he got the job, his reaction to getting the job. One of the very first things he talked about was the Carolina family.
North Carolina is the standard. There's nobody that has family, nobody that's an example of togetherness and family than here at North Carolina.
And we touched, and I prefaced this so much during the process, which was only a 4-day process. Roy Williams retired on Thursday. They hired their coach.
Hey, that's a process. The football
Monday.
Process was a couple of hours, and they had their head coach. So, yeah, that's a process at Carolina.
And I stressed how important this job means to the family, why it ultimately needs to stay within the family. And I think the reaction that he got from the immediate members of the family, guys that he's coached, guys that he's played with, but even he touched on Larry Brown, a guy that he was convinced didn't like him because he didn't want that. He asked for Larry Brown to waive him in his final year at Detroit. He ultimately does. Hasn't spoken to Larry Brown since, but the second Roy Williams retires, one of the first text messages he gets is from Larry Brown, a guy who played for Dean Smith in the 60s, saying, "I want you to be the next head coach of the Tar Heels." And that's why, you can say that you could have gotten a better coach than Hubert Davis for the Tar Heels, and Mark Few, Jay Wright, Brad Stevens, Wes Miller, even within the Carolina family. But this isn't just a team you're coaching. You're running and taking care of a program that goes back 60 years that none of those outsiders would get, and not even Wes Miller would get to the fullest extent. And that's why I think we're more comfortable with Hubert Davis, because he understands the history. He understands what comes with this job. And he's not going to willingly fail, I guess, is the best way to put that. Another thing, and you mentioned this a lot in the moments after the press conference, and something that was very obvious during his presser, is he talks a lot about Roy Williams the way Roy Williams talked about Dean Smith. Here's what the new head coach of the Tar Heels had to say.
Every time that he walked through the office, I took a deep breath because I just felt settled, because everything was going to be okay because Coach Williams was there.
And I know that's something that you put that on your Twitter feed.
That was a rather successful one. I've had a couple in these last couple of days here on the Twitter feed. So I spent so much time talking about when we did the the coaches podcast or coaching potential coaching hires podcast.
Yeah.
Talking about how you heard a lot of that